and me from Stockholm. So we are working towards a net zero affordable housing data lines. That's our main goal with this project. That's the reason why we started that. And we want to bring together the industry, researchers, and policymakers to help to achieve the net zero, the ambitious net zero target related to the housing sector. That's the reason why we will encourage you to join us then after the 2 events on our LinkedIn website, which we will start as well, about the net zero housing sector, so that we can keep in touch and exchange ideas and projects about this topic. So you will receive more information after the 2 events on our LinkedIn event website and web pages as well. So as you already see or has been informed, we record today this event. So this means the first 3 speakers and the talk will be recorded, but later if you then join the discussion part, we will stop recording. So please feel free to ask, even unmute yourself and show your face. We will not record you then later. So I started with the aim and goal of from our side to collect data, as we are data-driven researchers, Stanimira and I. However, today the focus is more on the Swedish and on the Stockholm's perspective. And the city of Stockholm has the ambitious aim to be a fossil-free and climate-positive city by 2030. And even 10 years earlier, we want to reduce the greenhouse gas emission by or 2 max of 1.5 tons per person per year. And I found this illustration on one of the websites of our speakers today, and it illustrates that we started with around 7 tons, more than 7 tons, and we still have the gap that we have to go from the 7 to the 1.5 over the next years. And the housing or accommodation sector is just one of them. So transport and the public energy consumption are other very important sectors, which are maybe linked. So we will have maybe time in our discussion part in the end to talk about the intersection between the different sectors. And if ideas like the 15 or 20-minute city is related to that, how we can combine then the different sectors to reach the aim of a reduced greenhouse gas emission. So the agenda for today is that we want to look at the users at the beginning. And Elena, she's a researcher, so welcome. She's a researcher at KTH, and she's connected at the Living Lab here on campus and outside of the campus as well. And she introduced how the environmental behavior is driven by consumers, how smart buildings are connected with that, and how we can learn from our experience, mostly at the project of KTH Living Lab, where we can test services, products, methods in real buildings with our students who are living then in these buildings. Then the next speaker, Christina, she works for the city of Stockholm, and she will talk about one of the development projects which is still going on. It's not finished in the district of Norra Djurgårdsstaden, or the Stockholm Roy Seaport in English. And she has insights then from the city perspective, how or what to do for a new development project. Then the last speaker is Jürgen. Jürgen is responsible for an initiative for a redevelopment of an already developed district in the south part of Stockholm, so Hammarby Sjöstad. And he will speak about the lesson learned, because they had a very ambitious aim. They want to be twice as good as the city by the energy and sustainability targets when they started the project around 20 years ago. And then they realized that it was not possible to reach all the targets. And now they started the 4.0 project to think about what they can improve after they realized that sometimes, or very often even, our simulation, which we have in the research as well, do not really fit the users or users' need and behavior. So this is then again linked to the first speaker, and the second speaker, Christina, speaks as well about that. This brings us then together in the last part, the panel discussion. And again, I will not record the panel discussion. And you are as well invited as panelists, as it's so easy now with Zoom. And please feel free to ask questions already during the talks, but please use the Q&A button, not the chat button. Use the Q&A button. We will collect all your questions, and then we can use your questions during the panel discussion in the end. So that's almost all from my side, but please do not forget that we have a second event next week, and please be not confused about the two different times. You can see on LinkedIn an automatic time conversion here to the Central European time, or 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. if you use the British Standard Time. So just scan the QR code and you can then find more information about next event next Wednesday about the British perspective. So now it's time for us to learn more about you and why you are here and your background. So Emma, it would be nice if you can start the poll, and please, select one of the answers, and then I can incorporate your background in the panel discussion at the end. So it's time, I think, to stop. So thanks, and we see already results. So most of us are from a research perspective, but still we have business related and tech people here as well. So thanks for your answer. I will share it then later as well. So now it's time for the first speaker. So let me introduce again Elena, who works for KTH. So the floor is yours for the next minutes, and please feel free to share your screen. I stop sharing.
Hi, everyone. It's actually really great pleasure to open such important events. And I think it's a nice starting point to start with human, because I will mostly try to bring you to the research project, which is very human-centric. And I will a bit speak today about buildings, user behavior, and service design. So let's start a bit with the philosophical aspect of us in our everyday activities. And during my study, I found very interesting, like Greek word called akrasia, the weakness of will, what means that it's a central problem of our minds, that we know a lot in theory about how should we behave, but we engage so little with our knowledge in our day-to-day conduct. I think it can set a bit the mood of my presentation, and it can bring you a bit background to what is important to do to really make impact to how do we live our everyday life in the built environment. 20th century mindset is about seeing building as a system of layers, which are a site, a structure, skin, and building services. That's how we normally create our vision of the building, and that's where we just try to create standards and regulations and frameworks and methods around kind of this part of the building. But in 21st century, a big role in development playing our lifestyle and how do we interact with our environments. And that's why we tried to focus more, not only on the building as a system, which we know previously, but also understand better how do we interact with different parts of our building, which type of products and services do we use as individuals, and also a big thing happening today is end user product services. I mean, when my Apple Watch talk with my kind of lighting system, is it building or not? It's kind of communication which is growing, and that's why we decided also to add this layer as a layer to research. And of course, we all know about building life cycle, and a lot of studies, they mostly focus on production stage and construction stage sustainability aspect. But now we are moving more and more to use stage. And my research mostly focused on use of the building, and with, of course, particular specific focus on end use, energy end use, and water end use. And that's where I found that I need to have a platform where I can have good access to end users, because if we talk about building operation stage, I need to really be able to communicate with end users. And that's how I found that's actually the fast growing track in academia, applied science, is living laboratories, which are using centric open innovation ecosystems. And they normally kind of processed in the real life context, and they have multiple stakeholders, and they have followed R&D kind of procedures and methods. And it's a lot about co-creation and interaction between different stakeholders. So that's why I started to search which lab I might land and do my study about. But before this, I started to also research that living lab is not just something what's happening now. Historically, we had different stages of this type of processes. I mean, actually started in Sweden in 70s. It's called cooperative design, when Electrolux asked their employees to kind of open their doors of their homes and try to research how do they like cook, how do they clean home, and just do analysis of end users' behavior. Then in 80s, it moved to some kind of social movement when people gathered and together decided what do they want on the street, on their district. And America was full of these examples. For example, Pecan Street project, where collectively people decided to change their built environment. Then it lately moved to more like IT garages, where you really could build something and test with end users. And we all know about Facebook, how was it made in the campus, the iterative process of test. And now what's happening is actually this living lab environment, mostly related to city landscape, where we try to pilot the bigger complex systems of human, of technology, of landscapes, of environments. And 5 years ago, I started to search which lab would I like to work with. And one of the lab which I really specifically found very interesting is Living Lab at KTH here in Sweden. And I directly signed in that I really would like to do my research here, and that's where I started. But Living Lab is in many buildings. I specifically focus on one of the building in our kind of portfolio, which is built by Einar Mattsson. And this is a building of 300 students' apartments, where 4 apartments classified as research laboratory. It looks like apartments, but it is a laboratory where people are allowed to live. And that was my setting. I needed to define how I can do my study about behavior and build environment, and I defined also services in this context. And when I start to observe like trends and different systems from the point of end users, we have a very interesting graph interaction between people, products, services, and environments, different environments, built environments, like street environments, office environment, and so on and so on. So I start to explore how these elements are interacting, and thing is that most of the studies, they kind of not neglect, but very slightly like research people in this context, because we have a lot of papers and research done on IoT, on smartness, on services, on built environments itself, but humans are heavily under researched. And that's why I decided that in my study, I will try to focus on people, on services, and on the built environment. And my main hypothesis in my study is about tailoring design process with behavioral analysis to generally understand how do people behave in their everyday life, to understand what are their points of interaction, what are points of like negative, positive experiences, and which points of kind of touch points might be interesting to improve and possible to improve understanding individual context. So this kind of study starts as a general analysis of everyday behavior with a specific focus of possibilities where we can do some changes. And of course, theoretically, there are 3 kind of disciplines in one study, which is, of course, building science and mostly building operation science. Then we talk about service science. and how design is happening of interaction between users and environment. And of course, it's a lot about behavioral aspects, especially like behavioral aspect from the point of motivation and decision making and so on and so on. And of course, we need some supportive theories. And in my case, I used three. Number one was service dominant logic, which actually help you to look at processes from the point of value creation mechanisms. How we can understand value proposition from end user side, how we can understand the value proposition from the stakeholders, companies like building owners and service providers, product providers. So it's a deep analysis of value creation and value exchange mechanisms. The second theory, which I used a lot, is pro-environmental behavioral modeling, where you also need to plan what is possible in the context of specific research landscape. In my study, it was or actual contributing to environmental conservation or perceived to contribute. What means that it's about we can't save some resources or we on the way to save some resources. Because of the nature of study, it was very explorative. I can't do both, but it's actually where we are moving with our study right now. And of course, talking about environmental conservation is about two kind of ways of behavior: reduction of negative impacts or increasing of positive impacts. And then while you research how people behave, you can really adjust where exactly you might build your strategy towards negative impact reduction or positive impact increase. And the third theory, which I use a lot, it's coming from innovation theory and theory where we try to understand who are the stakeholders and which way should we connect them to get to our planned results or at least expected results. And that's where we also played a lot with different kind of ownership model and openness model, because once you start to work with the real business context, you need to be very clear about who is contributing with what and how you share the outcomes and what might be outcomes, and all these things really take a lot of time and analysis. And from the point of stakeholders, I had very clear division on three categories: those who have a high level of interaction with end users, and you kind of don't see a lot of companies coming from building environments or building industry context. So the high level is mostly home appliances, some kind of product services, digital services specifically. They have a very high rates of interaction with end users. Then we talk about medium interaction, some kind of BMS, you adjust some things every day, not maybe every day, maybe sometimes. Of course, last meter services, you sometimes get some deliveries and so on. And of course, we also talk about poor interaction with end users. And that's actually where most of the representatives coming from construction and real estate business. What means that it is specific of the market that people who are deciding for specific buildings, they're not always interacting with these people. It's very seldom that company which is constructing the property also operating it. In our case, we work with a real estate company which is designing, constructing, and operating. That's why we kind of can really build them a holistic pipeline on starting decision making, what are the motivation, and they also can see how building is operated. And then, of course, we had a lot of cooperation participatory workshops where we try to kind of understand stakeholders and end users. And what's interesting that we found that stakeholders, they mostly care about space optimization, like value proposition, data in the building, and new business models. That's what actually stakeholders expect from project like mine. Also, they want to scale things. But if we talk about end users, they want different things. They want social spaces, they want an interaction between each other, they want a diversity of spaces, they want a kind of space which help them to be productive. They want to, of course, increase their comfort. Who doesn't? They only then care about sustainability and all these things. And after some kind of iterative process of understanding how can we create a common portfolio, we came to three topics, three themes, which gave us understanding what might be like intermediate portfolio between stakeholders' interests and end users' needs. And we come to food system, sustainable food system, because both sides really would like to have more solutions here. We also came to personalized well-being, and that's also both sides see potential energy saving and climate adaptation for well-being. That's a lot of this type of topics are popping up in this portfolio. And of course, space is a service, especially during pandemic when we really have a bit chaotic strategies about how to use our spaces. It is very needed to understand how we can redesign our strategies about space utilization and how we can add some smart layers of understanding that space might be actually a service. Let me see what's time, because I have a case study. Yes, I have time. Thing is that when I talk about this portfolio, it looks very clearly that there is a match between end users and companies. But what about environmental aspect? Because topic of today's meeting is not only affordable and desirable maybe, but also net zero. And in these portfolios, we did a modeling where we see that there is a potential to also optimize resource usage for each of this kind of proposition. And of course, these numbers, they're coming from model, which has some limitations and biases. But then we started to do a case study with each of this theme. And I will just show you how we started to work with sustainable food system. So we decided to run experiment for several months and analyze our end users' behavior related to food system, where we analyze how they interact with the kitchen and also how they use apartment for this for purpose related to food, and also how they interact with the city because they are getting food from outside the building. And like methodologically, we analyze first our students in the wall building and try to create some kind of personas which kind of reflect some behavioral patterns. And then we zoom into behavioral of 4 apartments and really did very deep analysis in analyzing their like each day food ingredients, their like shopping bills, deep analysis of sustainability of food coming to the building, like interaction with the kitchen, electricity consumption, water consumption, like almost each step they're doing about food, we did analysis about. And we came to a lot of numbers. I would not go deep into details, but we identify for different types of people which potential different activities might make some sense. And it's actually very interesting because if we don't do this persona thing, we might really be confused because some personas have very similar profiles from the point of energy consumption, but their motivation is actually very different. For example, the busy person, they just don't have time to cook, right? They just don't have time. They order a lot of food, but it doesn't mean that they use less energy for it. And that's why we see that indirect energy is very high. So there are a lot of things which you can understand only if you understand who are these people and what drive them to behave in a specific way. This kind of analysis help us to define some strategies for different types of people. And of course, then we need to scale out because for people, zoom in is, it's not enough for statistics, but when we zoom out from this for people and just bring back to persona kind of portfolio, we found that there's actually pretty good numbers, how much can they save. And again, this is not generalized study, it's a pretty individually driven approach, which can have a success because it might be systematic. When something works for individual and some individual accepts a specific change, it's becoming a habit. And our task, not just change behavior, but build habits. And after the study, we found that it is actually pretty high potential to do it on a systematic level. And I would like to finish with actually interesting quote from my mentor that we must design for the way people behave, not how we would wish them to behave. I think I will stop here because it's already time, and then you can ask all your questions in the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So just maybe one question, because you mentioned the space wish for more flexible space in your data set from the people and connected for pandemics. So was it written then for the place where they live or as well where they work? Because you have joint rooms as well. Can you say something about that already?
That's actually a very good question because it's a very hot topic today. Thing is, when we analyze human, we don't really block like room or like living, working. It's a day and we see how during the day users interact with different spaces. Of course, we focus on the residential sector. That was the core. But of course, we analyze how do they use external spaces in the campus. And we also understand the occupancy factor, how much do they spend time at home. And we all know that home has become the Swiss Army knife. It's a home, it's office, it's studio, it's a meeting point. So what means that space means that we try to understand how often do they use space, how much do they use space, and also to understand if space is not used. For example, most of the campuses, they're underused. What is critically important to add? Maybe we need to transform some spaces to this living, working studios. Or maybe we need to understand that there is a safer place where you can have a bigger distance between each other. So space is becoming, let's call it commodity, which should get very detailed analysis, not even per zones, but per square meters. Maybe there's a specific even zone in the space which is like better fits you because it's less noise. So what brought us to this idea that space is becoming interesting, like more like even computational platform, which is like becoming this platform for analysis, how they really use and what they need the most. And of course, coming back to a question, we worked a lot with office spaces as well, because they came to us and they asked, can we collaborate and learn what do users need? Because it was important to understand what to do with the office spaces. And the outcome is that we are coming back to a few days per week going to the offices. But it's not enough for the business running around office spaces. And that's where it's also discussion, how should we transform spaces to what end users do need? And that's kind of where it's ongoing process now with few big partners around Sweden, how we can connect homes and offices and make it a platform where two spaces are interacting, and we build this analysis by analyzing our end users. Because again, students, they're a specific type of customers of the space, but then we have another type of customers and they might have another needs, and you can't again generalize and make it equal for everyone. And of course, also talking about sustainability of the building, it's a lot about optimizing costs and processes, because now we overuse resources while we don't give too much value to end users. So it's a big process of optimization happening right now in this kind of space as a service territory.
Thanks a lot for now, but we will go back then to this issue later in our discussion. So Christina, yes, I see already you start screen sharing, perfect. So the next speaker is Christina from the city of Stockholm, and she speaks now about the development project in the Roy Seaport.
Thank you, Bertram. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, good. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. My name is Christina Salmhofer, and I am working as a sustainability strategist at the Development Administration, the City of Stockholm. I'm working with the sustainability work for one of our urban development projects, the Stockholm Roy Seaport. I am implementing different kinds of strategies. I am also initiating different research and development projects. And I'm also coordinating different kind of focus groups, so-called expert groups, consisting of experts from the different city administration and companies as a support to succeed in our work with the sustainability in the Stockholm Roy Seaport. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our journey when it comes to energy performance. So I'm just focusing on this subject, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about our results so far, the learnings we have gained, and what kind of knowledge we have built in this way in collaboration with our developers. I think Bertram already told a lot about Stockholm. Stockholm has a very long history of working with environmental issues, and actually since the 70s. Since 76, we have environmental programs. Actually, right now we have the 10th environmental program up running and decided at the City Council with the Climate Action Plan and the CO2 budget with about 19,000 million tons emissions by the year 2030, and afterwards a net zero. So we have a long history to decrease CO2 emissions, and we are working towards fossil fuel-free 2040, climate positive 2040, and now we actually also signed the climate contract to become climate neutral by the year 2030. So there are very ambitious visions and targets for the city of Stockholm. And one of the works we are doing is in the city of Stockholm, the Stockholm Roy Seaport, which is a very comprehensive urban development area, was decided upon by the city council to become a sustainability profiled area. And the assignment was to act as a spearhead, as a flagship, as a test bed, more or less, to create knowledge, which means testing, implementing different strategies, methodologies, and tools to help us towards sustainability, evaluate those strategies, learn, and also disseminate the strategies, the results we have learned, to other projects within the city. This picture was taken in the year 2009. It's more or less showing the whole area. It's a former brownfield area. It covers old gas production, harbor activities, container terminal, oil depot, and much more other industrial activities. And by the year 2030, there will be about 12,000 apartments and 35,000 working spaces. So around 60,000 people will be working and living in this area. So this is what it looked like at that time. And now we are here more or less, more than 10 years later. About 3,000 apartments are occupied, so 7,000 people are already living in the area, and my administration, the development administration, is responsible to plan and build the residential, to plan for the residential and commercial uses, and is doing this by selling and granting leased land as the city owns the land. And we are also responsible to build the infrastructure and also municipal services. So at that time, where we have 7,000 people moving in the area, we have already now 11 preschools, 1 elementary school, a sports center, and a library, which has been finished and is already in place in the Stockholm Roy Seaport. As I mentioned before, the land is owned by the city of Stockholm, and the city council decided in 2009 that there should be a sustainability profile. So the very high expectations. So we came up together in a very broad collaboration with different stakeholders with a sustainability program where we have pointed out 5 different targets area, a vibrant city where we put the people in the center. We have accessibility and proximity where we prepare the city and build the city in a way so it should be easy for the people to choose sustainable modes of transport. Resource efficiency and climate responsibilities about building and planning for robust and flexible systems when it comes minimizing climate impact and minimizing environmental impact. That enable to the job is about strengthening ecosystem services and participation and consultation, of course, involving people living in the area and around the area. So we also developed in this assignment an own working process. So starting with our steering document, we are working a lot with R&D projects, of course, and we have those focus groups who are helping us to break down the targets of the sustainability program into different requirements, which we are setting as binding to our developers. So we are working with very clear requirements and verifications so that the developers have to send in and submit different kind of calculations, different kind of drawings so that we can review if they can comply to the requirements or not. So there's also a lot of capacity development engaged here. But of course, it's very easy to set requirements, but it's much more difficult to monitor it. So we developed a web-based data program where we are collecting the different verifications from the developers, all the calculations and the drawings and so on, and reviewing them with the help of the experts of the city of Stockholm. And at the same time, we have a lot of learning going on here. We are also inviting the developers and their consultancies, but also civil servants, to participate in these feedback seminars, because it is a two-way learning, a mutual learning, of course. And at the end of the day, we are publishing the results in our annual report, which is published on the website of the Stockholm Roy Seaport. And this is a very important incentive for our developers to walk the hall of fame, because everybody is very afraid to walk the hall of shame. So this is a very good incentive for the developers actually to work in a way so that we can fulfill and ensure that the requirements are complying to. This picture is showing more or less our planning and development process. From idea to occupation, it takes in Sweden about 7 years. So it's a very long process with a lot of milestones. So in Stockholm Roy Seaport, we have our action program, which is already when our developers are asking for land allocation, which is already under discussion and introduced. And as soon our developers are signing the contract, the land allocation, the action program is part of the agreement, and and at the same when we are signing the development agreement a little bit later. As soon our developers are signing the land allocation, we start with our capacity development program, inviting our developers and their consultancies, consultants to participate, because we need to get the same framework. We need them to understand why we are setting requirements. We are bringing up good examples from other developers, and it's also a possibility to discuss and to network, which has been proved very, very successful and important, so that we know that the developers really understand what we are asking for. And then after the developers starting to come up with different documentations, as the preliminary design documentation, system design documentation, and so on, we start to monitor. So we are asking for different kind of verifications. And especially when it comes to energy performance, we are monitoring at 5 different stages, just to ensure that the developers are really complying to the requirements set. So it's really important that sustainability is going throughout the whole process, from the early design processes until operation, where we're going hand in hand together with our developers. Now I wanted to talk a little bit about one of our phases, which is called Brewfest. This is a phase which is consisting of around, I would say, 9 developers, and covers around 700 apartments. And we were setting the requirements such as that it should be the half of the national building codes. In that sense, we would define it in maximum of 55 kilowatt hours per square meters in a year. So this is including heating, hot water, cooling, and property electricity. And we're also asking for very clear verification. The energy calculations has to be done in all phases, from program until operation, 2 years after occupation. And that has to be done according to Swedish standard. And the energy calculation has to be done according to an ISO standard or a validated dynamic calculation program. But the monitoring of metered values has to be submitted after 1 and 2 years, and an energy declaration has to be done with metered values and not projected values. So when we are looking into this phase, Brewfest, you can see here this diagram. On the x-axis, you have the developers, on the y, you have the kilowatt hours per square meter. And you can see at the orange rows are showing the set requirements for the Stockholm Roy Seaport at 55. And on the gray row, you see the National Building Code, where the requirements are. And when you're just looking at the staples, at the orange staples, you see that developers are actually fulfilling completely well the set requirements at the Stockholm Roy Seaport. But when we're looking into metered values, which are the green staples, you see suddenly that it doesn't really comply anymore. And that was actually really surprising to the developers and also to us, because we were following the developers under a quite long journey, and we were looking into and really following them on the programs and detailed design documentation, where they fulfilled it completely. But then something happened during construction and operation. There's also something I need to mention here. Everything is, of course, depending on how you calculate. We have specific accounting principles in the Stockholm Roy Seaport due to different reasons. The first is that all electricity used for heating and hot water needs to be weighted by the factor 2, also multiplied with 2. This is due to that we want to assure technical neutrality. It doesn't matter where the energy is coming from. Is it from the district heating? Is it from the sun? Is it from the geothermal? It has to be technical neutral. And then the second is that the locally produced renewable energy may not be credited. And this is also due to that we want to avoid, as we say in Sweden, technical Christmas trees. We want to assure that the buildings have a very good climate envelope with a very well insulated facades, roofs, floors, windows, and so on. But we also want them to produce renewable energy on the roofs, of course, and on the facades, of course, but it should not be used to compensate for. Yeah, but as I said, everything depends on how you're accounting. So if you would look into how they would account in the according to the National Building Codes, you need to look at the blue staple. There they wouldn't use a weighting factor, and the locally produced renewable energy could be credited for. So actually looking into how they would have calculated the National Building Codes, the figures would be a little bit better, especially the first two developers. And I think I should maybe mention also the second developer, which is called Stockholmshem. This was actually the result of land allocation competition that we ask the developers to compete on plus energy houses. So actually this building from Stockholmshem is actually a plus energy building. And we have seen now after 1 year of occupation that it is actually proven that it is an energy building, which means it's producing more energy over the year than it consumes. So everything, as said, is about how you're accounting, of course. So what happens? Why is it such a big difference between the projected and the metered values? When we look into the project planning, we were reviewing all documentation, and all documentation was showing that the developers would be below 55 kilowatt hours per square meters. However, we could see that later on, of course, that the hot water circulation losses were underestimated. The efficiencies of the different components were overestimated. In the first phases, they had an energy coordinator connected to the project, but the energy coordinator disappeared more or less after some time. So it was not following the whole process. We could also see that the safety margins often were lacking, which is also a problem. Coming into the construction phase, even here, we were reviewing the documentation very thoroughly. And there we could suddenly also see the very, very big deficiencies in the handover from the project planning to the construction phase. So it's a lot about communication here. We could also see the very, very big deficiencies when it comes to the quality assurance during the construction phase. So we had components that were incorrectly installed. We had meters which were faulty and they wouldn't know it 2 years after, or incorrectly mounted. We had thermal bridges suddenly arising due to deficiencies in the quality assurance. Windows which were very well insulated in the projecting phase. They were replaced with windows with worse U values, for example. And we could also see in this in Brewfest that actually they started to install wastewater heat exchangers, which means that they would use the heat from the wastewater to bring it back in the buildings. And they were very often incorrectly installed. Then we also found out that a lot of meters were missing actually. And the energy coordinator had definitely left the project. So there was no energy coordinator left. When it comes to commissioning, we could see that there were some deficiencies also here in the handover routines, especially when it comes to monitoring routines. Another problem is that we detect in nearly all houses very high indoor temperatures, which are about 23 degrees. Which is much too high, of course. Imbalances in airflows and the components default value have not been adjusted either. And as I mentioned before, also stated efficiency from the material suppliers did not correspond with reality. So what have we learned so far? The meters values are often higher than the set requirements here. The heating was much higher than calculated. It's mostly about the heating here, what is deviating. To our surprise, actually, the hot water use was actually much lower than calculated. We calculated with about 25 kilowatt hours per square meters, and I think in China it was about 17, 18 kilowatt hours per square meters. And the property electricity use varies a lot, actually. And this is still what we are discussing a lot. So we have ongoing discussions here with our developers to find out what happened, why did it happen, and what is the problem actually. And in the beginning, as I mentioned before, they wouldn't know. So we still have working a lot with troubleshooting and corrective measures. So the work is ongoing. So right now, in average, it is about 65 kilowatt hours per square meters, which is quite good, but it's not good enough. Well, where we also found out that we really need to, the developers really need to improve routines and knowledge. We had a lot of discussions with the different developers, and they are very thankful that we really help them to find out what's wrong. And we also have meetings there. All the developers are meeting so they can exchange their experiences, network, and so on. And we are building a very important knowledge base right now. So important here is for our coming up phases that safety margins need to be incorporated in calculations. Measurement and monitoring routines need to be established. And we also started to set requirements on all our coming developers to develop those routines and come up with a measurement plan. We also see that coordinated function testing is very important as soon as the building is finalized, which has not been done, which is actually surprising. And of course, energy coordinators need to be involved throughout the whole process, from the early process until occupation, just to verify that all the components would work and everything is installed and so, and so on. We also know that monitoring is really important from day one. This is something we're really struggling a lot to reach out to our developers. And of course, last but not least, the project manager, but of course also the maintenance people, they need to be engaged and committed, and they need to have a will to take part and to be activated to succeed. And with that, actually, I'm finished with my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So don't forget to post your questions in the Q&As, and we will have time after the next speaker in our discussion to address all your questions. But before we move forward, I want to raise a few questions, Christina, if it's possible right now. So from the research perspective, I like that you mentioned that we have to monitor the data from day one, because that's our source of research as we do it, from who are quantitative data driven. But you mentioned more from the perspective of the developer, because you as the city are then involved with the developer. Elena mentioned the user. So what do you think, because you saw in the end then as well that the estimated data are then not correct. So was it one, I don't want to say the failure of the developer, so what is more important to look, is it more on the development side, or have we at the planning development already think about the end user and how they use the building, how they use the technical equipment in the building?
This is a very good and important question. I think Jürgen will a little bit later also elaborate on that. But what we the Stockholm Roy Seaport is this eco city district, the same as the Hammarby Sjöstad was 10-15 years ago. It started to be 10-15 years ago. And one of the most important findings from the Hammarby Sjöstad was, it's really important. It's not enough just setting requirements, but you also need to monitor them. And you need to have feedback processes for that. This was the most important further finding. And the other most important finding was that you need to make it easy for the people to do the right thing. So of course you need to have the end users in your mind. So I think that user-friendly systems are really important because people shouldn't need to decide upon what is wrong and what is right. I think when we are talking nowadays about, I mean, we are building houses which has to be here for about hopefully 150 years, hopefully more than that. So what is really important here is to build houses with right from the beginning, with a very good climate envelope, really energy efficient housing, because this is very, very difficult to change later on. At least it will get really expensive. I think there are a lot of examples in Stockholm, for example, from the houses which were built in the 60s and 70s, where they do not have a high quality. So I think high quality housing is good. That's why you need to be on the developers. You need to ensure that they really are building what they are obliged to do, because we want to have we want to build for the long term. The building should hold over time. But of course, the end users are very important too, because those are the people who are living in the buildings, and a lot of aspects are user driven. I mean, I talked about the hot water. This was actually not as what we thought. So the use was much lower, but of course the heating is a big problem. And one part of that is, it's not just thermal bridges, which is the developer responsibility, but it's a lot of problems with very high inner temperature. So there needs to be a continuous communication with the end users from the real estate owners.
Thank you. And at least one more now, because you mentioned the long life, the life cycle of a house. So there's a discussion going on about the energy which is necessary to build the material and the house itself. So if you, because you mentioned the city of Stockholm was or is the owner of the land, how important is something like this in the decision which development then wins such a call? So how important was it for you from the city perspective, which material is used during the construction process and in the context of sustainability?
Yeah, embodied energy is a very important part to look at. So we are asking all our developers, and also, of course, our own work, because we are building a case, we are building an island, we are building, and we have to pole everything because we have a really bad soil conditions. This is a former sea bed, you can say. So there's a lot of how do you say, concrete and steel, which is needed. So we are actually to both. We are setting requirements on climate calculations, as we say it, which means that we want them to calculate in a very early phase. And then we want them to take submit an action plan, how they can minimize the climate impact. But I have to say that we get really, how do you say that in English? Really results which are really not comparable to each other. Everybody is accounting in different methods. So we actually, when it comes to climate calculations, I would say we are now at the time where we have been 20 years ago when it comes to energy calculations. So we are still on the beginning, but we are we are building knowledge right now. And I really hope that I do not dare to be too optimistic, but I hope within 1 year that we actually can set a key performance indicator for that. We haven't set it yet, but we are working a lot with the discussions with the developers to find out what kind of key performance indicator we could set. And we are also discussing this more on a national level, because I think it's so important to come further in this question. And when it comes to our own work, when it comes to the polling and the concrete in the public space, we are testing different kind of recipes, concrete recipes, and using, I think, is it called slag? Slag product, which is from the steel industry, the rest products from the steel industry. So we are testing right now how much we can use and substitute it with cement. I don't know, is this the
Perfect.
word in Swedish? Yeah, in English, sorry.
Concrete,
So,
yes.
So we try to work a lot to be sure that we can come further in this area too.
Okay, great. Then the last question before we go then further, and the last speaker, Jürgen, will present what they did in the redevelopment of the already existing district in the south part of Stockholm. You mentioned that the Norra Djurgårdsstaden is residential and working. It's a working district as well. And so disclosure, I'm living in this district as well. So I have to commute around 12 minutes to go from my residential place to my workplace, which is then not directly in this district. So it's the connection is good, but for the future, I guess we need more working place closer where we live. And as I see it right now, the working places are not finished in this new developing district. So was it then the reason that the industry doesn't ask for finished office space right now in this district? So of course we see supermarkets, we see banks, real estate agents, but let's say a normal workplace for companies is still missing in this district. So does it take just 5-10 years? Yes.
Yeah, well, we are working from phase to phase, from the north to the south, and we have different, how you say, we have different areas which we have appointed to become more residential, and some are more offices. Right now we finished or be the middle of the residential area, but coming closer to the seaside, there will be much more offices and retail. It's as we have, as I mentioned before, our planning and building process takes about 7 years. So there's a lot of things going on. Sometimes things are moving faster, some things are moving not so fast. But we have, of course, a lot of offices and retails, which is right now in the planning. This is just a coincidence that we started with the residentials, because we started from the inside, and the closer we come to the waterfront, we have a lot of challenges when it comes to noise, for example, and there, of course, we cannot build residential buildings. So this is a combination, but right now we have been built most on the residential.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So the next speaker is Jürgen Löw, CEO from Electricity Innovation. And as already mentioned at the beginning, he will present about a southern district of Stockholm and what they learned during the youth period, and when they recognized that maybe sometimes not everything as is in the end as it was planned. So the digital floor is yours. Jürgen, if you want, you can share your screen or just present what you want to present.
Thank you, Bertram. I'll share my screen. Let's see if you see what I see. Do you see whoops, here we go.
Yes.
You see electricity now? Yeah.
Yes.
So my name is Jürgen Löw. I'm the CEO of a citizen initiative here in Hammarby Sjöstad, just the southern part of Stockholm. And this is the question that keeps us busy in our citizen initiative: how to become climate neutral by 2030. And we work within a quadruple helix, which is a collaboration between business, academia, cities, and the citizens. And we try to involve everybody. And these are our members and partners in electricity, membership organization. So it's everything from big companies to very small SMEs and research institutes and what have you. So just to give you a brief background to Hammarby Sjöstad 1.0, that was a municipal project, and it was a new district built on an old industrial land. I think it was the late 80s when the Stockholm city mayor back then said that I want to build something twice as good as anything built before. It was meant to be an Olympic village for the Olympic Games 2004, which we didn't get, but they continued to build it anyway. So when they built Hammarby Sjöstad, they came up with a new planning process, a horizontal one, that we now called eco-governance, which meant that the city planners, the builders, the energy companies, and what have you, sat down around a table and tried to figure out how to do it as sustainable as possible. So it was Stockholm's first major investment in sustainable urban development. It's about 2 square kilometers, and the construction began in 2000. And Stockholm became the first green city in Europe in 2010, much thanks to Hammarby Sjöstad. And I would say that Hammarby Sjöstad is probably one of the most well-known Swedish brands in the world today. We've had a couple of 100,000 visitors from all over the world. And this is what they came up with in this horizontal eco-governance process. We call it the Hammarby model. And it is a closed system where we reuse energy from waste, food waste, and water. We have some of the biggest, actually the biggest heat pumps in the world in Hammarby Sjöstad, where we reused the heat from the water, the spill water. That goes back into our system. So the original idea was that energy consumption would be reduced by 50%, but in fact it became only 30 to 40%, which is not bad, but there is room for improvement. So the transportation goal has been achieved in Hammarby Sjöstad, much thanks to a local tram that goes in the middle of our city district. We have buses, a lot of carpools were initiated. We have bicycles, e-bikes, and what have you, for sustainable transport. But the energy target was not reached. The district heating and cooling is over 100 kilowatt per hours per square meters in a year, and it was supposed to be around, back then, was it 80 or something? No, actually it was supposed to be 100, but it's over in a lot of houses, sorry. So Hammarby Sjöstad is still growing, and this is Stockholm New, built by Skanska here in Hammarby Sjöstad. And we're setting new standards on buildings in terms of energy and climate. And today we're about 25,000 people, and we will be about 35,000 people by 2030. And there will then be workplaces for about 20,000 people. A lot of co-working spaces as it is right now. So Hammarby Sjöstad is our project in our citizen initiative. Hammarby Sjöstad 2.0. And it was started in 2012 around a kitchen table that an old finance minister here in Sweden called Allan Larsson started. And by 2015, we started Electricity, which is then a collaboration with companies, municipalities, academia, and citizens. So we see ourselves as a testbed for energy, e-mobility, circular economy, and digitalization. So we're like a living testbed with 13,000 people. And knowledge, we work with knowledge and education a lot as a carrier for behavioral change. This is a graph from the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency. And it shows that for a regular Swede, the private energy consumption is up to 7 tons per year. And we have to reduce it to 1.5 tons. And as this graph shows, it's pretty even. It goes to housing 2 tons, transportation 2 tons, food 2 tons, and then another ton for shopping and what have you. And so that's what we're working on, trying to get down to 1.5 tons. So we have been working now for about 6 years pretty intensely on energy, transportation, and what have you. So now we're trying to spread what we learned so far. So we did this model for citizen engagement, and we did it in a symbol as a tree. And our roots are, as I said in the beginning, the quadruple helix, the companies, the cities, the citizens, and academia. And these are our branches: energy, circular economy, transport, and digitalization. And let me tell you some of these initiatives that we've been doing so far. Let's get into energy to begin with. So this branch has grown pretty big, and we have this initiative called Energy at Home. And the first thing we do when it comes to knowledge, spreading our knowledge, is eco drives. And you see the guy in the photograph there, the guy with the white hair. His name is Willy, and he's one of the foremost energy efficiency experts in Sweden. And he's been teaching us how our houses work and what does not work. And it ends up being a protocol that we get into our board of our housing association where we live that cannot be ignored. So we've done a lot of energy efficiency matters in Hammarby Sjöstad. We've actually gone through most of the buildings, over 50 now. We have 56 in an organization called Sjöstadsföreningen. So they get this energy mapping, the eco drive, for free, these housing associations. It's not that costly at all. And but there is a requirement for them to participate in energy meetings and also to give us somebody to talk to on these energy meetings, an energy manager, somebody that lives in the house and then is interested in the energy flow of the house. And you can see Charlie there. He's on just above Willie there, the guy with no hair. And Charlie, by now, he saves over 180,000 euros per year on energy consumptions. And the total that they're paying is 220, so it's almost climate neutral, I would say, no costs. So we do regular energy meetings, and we there discuss what we've done, and hearing what a neighbor has done really inspires the rest of us, because if somebody's done a great investment, then of course I can do it myself. I live in a similar house, very close by, and I can use the same entrepreneurs. We found out after a while that there had been 10 BRFs that had done some major investments. So then we started with joint procurements, doing things together, buying things together. So since then we've been buying renewable energy, such as solar cells, geothermal heat, and investments in new control systems that we've done together. And this gives us, of course, big discounts on larger purchase volumes and the security of doing things together. So we have, and these investments have done, in my house, for instance, we have cut down our energy by over 50%, and in some other up to 70%, depending on the investment, of course. So the last step for us to take now, after doing energy efficiency matters and investing in renewable energy, is shared and stored energy in what we call microgrids. And this means using the existing electricity networks and adding locally renewable energy and storing it and sharing it between properties. The picture on the bottom right shows a bunch of people, and that's the energy steering group within electricity. We meet a couple of times per year. And some years ago, we came up with the idea to get into microgrids because we have a problem with effect in Stockholm. There's not enough. So that's why we initiated microgrids. And we, about 2 months ago, got a go from the Energy Authority here in Sweden to do a microgrid here and one in Örebro. So we're now a testbed for that. And I'll show you a little bit more about what we're doing when it comes to the microgrid here in Hammarby Sjöstad. So we're installing solar cells on our roofs. We're installing battery storage in the properties, in our properties. And then the houses share energy through the existing electricity grid. And that goes through an LSO, a local system operator. And then it goes to the electricity network owner. And there is a lot of business model to figure out here, of course, on this flexibility market. And tax laws that has to be changed in order to make this profitable. So this is a 4-year project, and we're in the beginning of this journey. Let me get into transport. We had some 500 to 600 people trying electric cars some 6 years ago. Everybody was really enthusiastic, but nobody bought the cars because they didn't know where to charge it, of course. So we initiated Charge at Home, which is once again a joint procurement now of charging infrastructure that has resulted in cheap and smart home charging. So I have an electric car, and in front of my garage, my parking place, there is a charger, as it is now on the picture here, and I'm paying 25 euros per month for charging and the charger itself. I mean, energy and charger. 25 euros per month. That can be. If I would do that on elsewhere, it would be very expensive. More expensive, of course. And it's smart charging, slow charging, of course, overnight. So by now we have over 1,000 chargers in our garages. So we have 25% coverage of chargers in our garages. We also formed something that we call an informal zero zone, which is joint procurements of transports with requirements for conversion to electric power. That is all the trucks and the maintenance people coming in every day doing stuff in Sjöstaden. We ask them to, if they get a bigger pile of business, then they have to convert into electric. And so that has been the case now for many entrepreneurs. Circular economy. So how do we stop people from shopping about and sharing and things, sharing instead? So we turn to the kids in Hammarby Sjöstad in a project that we call the Future Scout. That's the bottom image. It's been a task for students in grades 4 to 6 to develop new products and services for 2 weeks that can have a positive impact on the environment and the climate. So they've been participating in workshops, learning about what we do, and then producing their own product and service. And it's been very, very popular. We've done it now for over 1,500 pupils here in Sjöstaden. And their parents got interested, so we started the top picture, the Climate Scouts, which is then workshops for residents. So it's these kids bringing their kids and their grandparents to learn about hydroponic cultivation, building bee hotels, reducing food waste, and what have you. Of course, that had to stop during the pandemic, so now we've been producing films on the Climate Scouts for social media, and they've had 1,000 views every film that we produce. You have to see this as a menu now. I mean, I'm just giving you some examples on what we do. Digitalization. We started a real estate data lab a year and a half ago now, and the thought there is that through open data, we can learn more about our energy and real estate systems. We can store information and facts that can be used in environmental and sustainability projects in order to develop new products and services. And we have over 100 companies participating, figuring out new ideas. We also have a neighborhood portal for sharing gadgets and services and information in the neighborhood. If we want to share things with your neighbors, for instance. So this is our menu, and we're working on recipes to share these with others. And all this in order to try to become climate neutral and show the way here in Hammarby Sjöstad at 2030. So the possibilities we've been seeing is that facts really can make facts work for change, the knowledge as a carrier for behavioral change. And we share knowledge amongst one another, and we're building new business ideas, and our idea is to spread these business ideas, of course. And joint procurements is really good to get it on a grander scale. So there are 9 cities now that signed to be climate neutral here in Sweden by 2030 through Viable Cities, a program that KTH is involved with. And now we're in discussion with 3 of them, Enköping, Umeå, and Stockholm, and trying to spread what we do. And I think I'll stop there. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Jürgen, for your presentation. And before we start then the general discussion, so please post your questions still in Q&A, or later, if it's possible, you can unmute yourself. I just want to ask you now, Jürgen, one question, which I asked indirectly already, Christina, about the co-working spaces or the workplaces in Norra Djurgårdsstaden, because you mentioned in Hammarby Sjöstad, you have co-working space. And I just want to explain to everybody that I mentioned, I commute within 12-15 minutes between Nørre-Djurgårdsstaden and KTH, but our students, for example, living in your district, they have to commute around 40 or even a little bit more minutes to go to the north part of the city where all the three universities are located. So having the pandemics in mind and the future, what is then what you're asking for the, not just only the industry, also like universities, if you go back to the normal time, then should we have, what we have to change so that people can still work from home and save energy? Because in one of your pictures, you showed that it's not just the housing accommodation, it's also transportation, which consumes our CO2. So we all have to change our behavior to reach the aim of CO2 emission reduction. So again, sorry, what is, from your perspective, what the employer or something like university as well have, or what we have to need to do to reach the aim by 2030?
So maybe you should open up a hub then in KTH, a southern hub at Slakthusområdet, for instance, and maybe you can share that hub with other schools such as Konstfack and maybe even lower grades, right? Use your facilities in a smarter way, and don't have, you know, the people, the students living on the southern side of Stockholm, don't have them to commute that far. I mean, we're setting up, there is a company here in Hammarby Sjöstad that's setting up a hub, and they're actually, the aim is to get companies that have their offices in Kista, and they're setting up a safe gate, so you don't have to be afraid of sharing your information on your computer. So I think that's going to happen big time.
Thank you so much. So Emma, in the background, can you help me? So you can stop recording, and then you can even reopen the results of our poll. So about the background of